Hello everyone, and welcome to the RV Inspection and Care channel. I'm Dwayne and I'm a certified RV inspector, and today we're going to be talking about a very important subject, and that is RV safety items and procedures that can save your life. You know, I know that there's a lot of folks that are a little hesitant about talking about safety issues. Either number one, it kind of bores them, or number two, they may feel, a little uncomfortable talking about things that could possibly happen. And that's the reason why, as RV inspectors, when we go into an RV, it's amazing how many times you find that it's the RV safety items that are not getting the attention that they really deserve. Maybe the owner is taking care of all these other items that are mechanical and maybe the appliances, but not thinking about the safety items. And that's really not a good thing to do. Most of my videos are really about how to save money with RVing, or how to make RVing more enjoyable and that kind of thing. But I'll tell you, today's video is one of the most important that I can share with you, because we're really not going to be talking about saving money today. We're going to be talking about saving lives. So this is very, very important information to consider. Now, there's several ways that there could be issues that arise that could be hazardous around an RV. First of all is fire. I mean, that could happen anywhere, almost wherever we go. But in an RV, you also have to be careful about inhaling too much LP or propane, because propane is part of RV living for the most part. Also, you've got to be concerned about inhaling too much carbon monoxide as well. Carbon monoxide is formed whenever there's combustion of any kind of fuel, and there's usually a few different kinds of fuels on an RV, so there is the possibility of that being an issue. Then, once again, too, there's the whole subject of road safety. So, going down the road, there's the possibility of a tire blowout that could cause a loss of control, or you could get in an accident, things along that line. So clearly there are hazards that we need to be aware of and that we need to prepare for. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is ways to prepare so that we don't get into a major issue and problem, or if we do, we know exactly how to handle it when it happens. Now, I've got my trusty dusty list here so that I can go down and not miss anything, because this really is important information. And my list is telling me that the first thing we want to talk about is fire safety. And with fire safety, the first line of defense really is your smoke detectors. And, that comes down to how many should you have, first of all. For us, we have a 40-foot motorhome, so I'm not comfortable with just one. We have two, one in the front and one in the back. But you need to make sure that they're not only there, you've got to make sure they're actually working and functioning. To do that, there's usually a test button on it somewhere. So you press the test button, make sure that the power is available for that smoke detector to actually work. Now, usually it's just a battery or maybe a couple of batteries, and if they need to be replaced, replace them right away. Smoke detectors do no good if they don't have the power to actually be able to function. Now, the other thing is you need to make sure that smoke detectors are not out of date. It's generally recognized that there's a 10-year lifespan for most smoke detectors. However, make sure that you consult your manufacturer for the ones that you have and follow their directions. But generally speaking, in most cases, it'll be about a 10-year lifespan. If they're beyond that, don't take the chance. Just get rid of them and get some new ones. They're not that expensive anyway. And once again, it's really about saving your life. Now, the next line of defense on fire safety is fire extinguishers. So if a fire breaks out, you want to be able to curtail it as quickly as possible. The number one place to have a fire extinguisher is right by the entry door to the RV. And that's what you'll notice. Almost all manufacturers put them right by that front door. Why? Well, because that enables you to use the fire extinguisher both inside and outside. It's quickly accessed for either place. But now, once again, if you have a bigger RV on the inside, you may consider having more than just one. For instance, with us, we have 3 fire extinguishers in our RV. Again, there's one by the front door in the front, we have one in the very back, and we have one right in the middle underneath the sink. The point is, make sure you have a fire extinguisher that's available to you, that you can access within just a couple of steps, just a few steps from anywhere you may be in the RV. That's that important. Now, once again, you need to make sure that these fire extinguishers are not out of date. That is very important. Generally speaking, most fire extinguishers are out of date after 12 years. However, once again, make sure that whatever one you're using, that you follow the manufacturer guidelines on that. And if it needs replacing, replace it. Once again, lives are at stake. Now, the third point we want to make about fire safety, and this is one that I see a lot of folks do not follow. They may be good about smoke alarms, great about fire extinguishers, but they don't know where their exit windows are in the RV. You know, we all generally think, well, if a fire happens, I'll just run out the door. But what if there's a fire by the door? Well, you know, that makes things a lot more difficult. So manufacturers of RVs usually place an exit window somewhere, a window that is easily removed and where it's big enough you can actually get out of. For us here in our RV, we have 2 of them. So know where they are. And now, how do you do that? Well, they're very often actually labeled, you know, exit window. Or another dead giveaway is red levers there on that window. If you see red levers where you pull them to push the window out, well, that's where your exit window is. So know where they are. Make sure everyone who's going to be traveling with you in your RV knows where they are as well. And again, it could really save a life. All right, let's move along now from fire safety to LP or propane safety. Now, the RV manufacturers usually put an LP detector on every single RV out there. And you'll find them usually kind of low to the ground. The reason for that is because propane often goes low. You know, it stays lower in a lower area. So they put it down, usually on a wall, maybe on a cabinet. It's going to be within about a foot or 2 from the floor. And when you find it, once again, there's a test button usually. And that test button allows you to make sure that it's got power and it's actually able to function. But the next step is, if it's functioning, take the screws off. There's usually one on each side of the detector. Take those off and then pull the detector out. Look on the back plate. And what you're often going to find is the manufacture date of that detector. Now, this is important, my friends, because again, you don't want one that's beyond its lifespan. Typically, LP detectors only are designed to last for about 5 years. So once again, check the manufacturer of the one you have, but most are around 5 years. If it is beyond its lifespan, take that one out and get another one in there. Now, the next thing to do is, you make sure you've got a current LP detector. You make sure that it's got power coming into it, but that still doesn't tell you if it's actually working. So here is what I do to test an LP detector while I'm inspecting an RV. Well, here's a little trick that inspectors like to use to test LP detectors and make sure that they're actually detecting LP gas like they should. And all you need to do is use a little butane torch like this, very common, and then pull the trigger and ignite the flame first, okay? So that's the first thing we do, and there you go, we've got a flame. Now, the next thing you want to do is, while depressing the trigger here, keeping that down, you blow out the flame. Now, in this case, with the trigger still depressed, there's a little bit of butane that's coming out the end still here. All you need to do then is take the end of this torch and put it down by the sensor of the LP detector, and it'll be emitting a little bit of butane. Usually within 2 to 3 minutes, the detector will pick up on it and it will sound the alarm. And if it does, then you know everything's working the way it should. Now, if it doesn't, well, then I would either have that examined by a qualified technician or service center, or I would just go ahead and replace it. You don't want an LP detector that does not detect. So this is a little trick, a little way that RV inspectors use to make sure that LP detectors are actually working. So there you have it. For LP safety, make sure that you've got a current detector, that it has power, and that it is actually detecting LP or propane properly. Now, moving on our list is we want to check for LP leaks too. You can forestall a lot of problems if you know that a leak is starting to happen. So what you want to do in this case is wherever there's some kind of connection for the propane line coming out of the tanks, maybe going into the hot water heater or the furnace, or wherever you can find an LP line that has a connection, then take some soapy water, or there's also solutions that are actually sold on Amazon that allow you to be able to test those connections. You never want to test those with any kind of flame of any kind. But what you can do is take that soapy water, spray it on the connection. Now, initially, you're going to see some bubbling take place just from the soap that's in the water, but that'll fade very quickly. Before the water, the soapy solution actually evaporates, look for bubbles. If you see any bubbles happening while there's still solution on there after that initial bubble up, well, there's a leak there. And that's something that needs to be addressed right away by a qualified technician. All right, so now we've covered LP safety. Let's move on. My list tells me we need to talk about carbon monoxide detectors. You know, we mentioned before, carbon monoxide takes place whenever there's any combustion of fuel. Well, we often, if we have a motorhome, you're going to have a few sources of, combustion. Number one, you have your engine. So the engine itself is combusting fuel as it's moving down the road and that kind of thing, or running. You could have carbon monoxide being formed by your generator when it's running, or by the propane that's being used by your hot water heater or by your furnace. All of these are things that can create carbon monoxide, and if you aren't careful, if things aren't working like they should, some of that carbon monoxide can begin to build up inside in the living area and could be lethal to you. So you need carbon monoxide detectors, CO detectors. Now, in order to do that, again, you've got to have enough for the size of your RV. They're kind of similar to smoke detectors in that respect. You've got to have enough for the area. But once again, make sure they're not expired, they're not too old. You know, when it comes to CO detectors, it's generally a 5-year lifespan. But again, check your manufacturer, or the one that you have, and follow their guidelines. Make sure that test them, make sure that they're actually working, or by having some kind of power to them. Again, if batteries need to be replaced, go ahead and do that. Now, with CO detectors and smoke detectors, let me emphasize one other point too. They need to be RV approved. Don't go down to Home Depot and buy ones that are used in homes, in residential homes, and put them in your RV. You really actually need RV approved smoke detectors and CO detectors. Now, sometimes the CO detector will be combined with the LP detector too, but if not, you need, if it's not in your LP detector, make sure you have a separate CO detector as well. All right, well, we've covered all of those areas. Let's shift gears a little bit. My list tells me that we need to start talking about road safety now. Now, my friends, this is an area where honestly I see more problems here than almost anywhere else, is RVs on the road not being handled safely. The first way to make sure that you're practicing road safety is to take care of those tires. You know, tires are the thing that actually is gripping the ground. That's the one thing that makes your connection with the ground. And if something goes wrong with that, well, you can easily lose control. So the first thing you want to know is, what should the tire pressure be for the weight of my RV? And that's number one. Then you need to, number two, make sure that you keep your tires at that correct tire pressure. That means that if you have a tire pressure monitoring system, well, that makes it pretty easy, because you can at a glance make sure that the proper tire pressure is in your tires. But if you don't have one of those, then make sure that you regularly check that tire pressure and that everything is what it really should be. Now, the other point that you want to make on tires is, don't run on tires that have aged out. The truth is, for RVs, tires usually age out before they wear out. You know, in your car, you run tires so often that they usually wear out before they age out, but not on RVs. So there's a need for you to monitor the age of your tire. How do you do that? Well, on the tire sidewall, just look for a 4-numeral code. And it may be difficult to find. Sometimes they're on the outside of the tire. That's when it's easy. On the other cases, it's on the inside of the tire. That's just the way it was mounted. But look for this 4-digit code, like you can see right here. And the first 2 digits of that code is the week that the tire was manufactured. The second 2 digits is the year of its manufacture. And if that year of manufacture is more than 6 years old, well, most tire manufacturers recommend that you replace them at that point. So make sure you know the age of your tires. Don't be driving on tires that have aged out, because that is really a serious safety condition, safety hazard. So monitor the age of your tires very, very closely. Now, the next point we want to make on road safety is drive at a safe speed when you're on the highway. I can't tell you how many times that we're going down the road and we get passed like we're standing still by RVs, big RVs, going 80, 85 miles an hour, sometimes more. And, you know, I can tell you, my friends, those tires on that RV were not made to be traveling at that kind of speed. So it's better to slow down a little bit. Most tires for RVs are made to travel somewhere between 60 and 65 miles per hour. Maybe a little bit more at times, but don't make a habit out of it. And so as a result of that, if you run those tires at the right speed, heat doesn't build up excessively in the tire and then cause a blowout in many cases. So that's number one, is it'll make sure that your tires have the optimum conditions for traveling. But the second reason that you want to slow down, and keep a normal speed is because that RV weighs a lot. RVs have a lot of weight behind them, and therefore, if you've got to stop them quickly, well, the longer you have to do that, the better. Like, for instance, this video right here shows the way we like to travel down the highway is have plenty of space between us and the vehicle in front of us. If anything happens, then I can stop that RV as quickly as possible without fear of running into something when I do. So it's important to make sure that you keep that space between you and the next vehicle. Now, by the way, if you're traveling at a little bit slower speed, between 60 and 65 miles per hour, that kind of happens automatically because people just sort of go around you and pass you and go way ahead. Well, that's great because that gives you plenty of room then in case something does happen. So for road safety, make sure that you keep the right safe speed and that you keep those tires in really good condition as you're traveling down the highway. Well, my friends, RV safety it's not exciting until your life is in danger. Then it becomes very exciting, but the wrong kind of excitement at that point. That's the kind of excitement we can all live without, right? We just really don't want to be in those kinds of situations. But remember, you can't unring that bell when tragedy has already struck. So the solution is prepare well beforehand. Put safety first. And that's the way that very often you can avoid these kinds of situations or maintain control when they do happen. Now, don't want to say that you've got to live in fear of RVs or traveling in RVs or any of those kinds of things. That's getting a little too far the other direction. But what we can say is this. If you practice the safety procedures that we have talked about today and keep them as part of your regular maintenance routine in the RV, well then most likely that will ensure that you can safely enjoy your RVing adventures pretty much everywhere you want to go. Well, that's it for now. Have safe and happy travels, my friends. Until next time.